This episode sponsored by Lake Monster Details, producing the Don's Light and Magic Legacy line of parts, offering upgrade parts and decals for accuracy, special effects, and lighting. Visit www.lakemonsterdetails.com and make it glow. Also sponsored by GCals, producing aftermarket replacement decals and custom quality graphics for your favorite spaceships. Visit www.gcals.company.site and add some personalization to your sci-fi models today. Also sponsored by Mask Design, boldly going where no masking kit has gone before. Take your model to the next level of detail and accuracy with a masking kit from Mask Design. Visit Mask Design on Facebook or click the ordering link in the notes below the video.
Hey, what's up, fellow modelers? Will here. Welcome to the Anson's Chair. This episode, we are going to get the lighting done on the saucer. I'm not going to try to pick it up. I got all these wires hanging out of it right now because it's kind of makeshift hooked up into the control board. But we're going to get all the lighting done. I'm going to show you how I do my wiring on the saucer. It's probably not much different than a lot of other people do it, but if you're not familiar with doing a lot of wiring, I'm going to show you how I do mine, and you can decide how you want to do yours. But took a little bit longer for me to get this episode out. I had to order some more supplies. There was some stuff I didn't realize I was out of. Some SMDs I had to do. I had to get in, and I got those in. So I got the work done, and we're ready to almost ready to seal this up. But we got a little more work we're gonna have to do on the next episode. But anyway, give me a minute. I'll put you on the bench. We'll get to work. All right, so I've been working out the internal lighting on this, and while I was working on internal lighting, I accidentally shorted out two of the wires, and I burnt out the SMD on the top of the bridge here and inside the officer's lounge. So I had to pull that back out, and I could have done this without pulling the bridge off, but I wanted to move the bridge forward a little bit more just to get a little more light cast a little further up here. So I did that, which meant I also had to repaint my clamshell, which I've done that. So we're back to where we were now, and I've done some additional work because when I was considering how I want to light everything, I already knew that I was going to use the lighting from the bridge to light the registry in the front. But you've got a couple other registries that are lit, and they were lit with mirrors back in the day. And you know, Ian came up with this Ratheon method where you backlight the plastic and it shows up like a light, which was brilliant, and it's great. I did my first 1350 that way, but this one I kind of want to step it up a little bit. So I've been contemplating how to do it, and my thought was, while I had that officer's lounge out, I went ahead and I drilled using my pin vise and a 1/32 drill bit. I drilled a small hole under the, you can see it right above the officer's dining windows there. Focus this just a little bit for you. You see that small hole center line just above the officer's dining windows there. And I did that, and it let me run a I think it's a .075 or let me see, 0.75 millimeter piece of fiber optic in there. And what I did was I ran it inside and wired it, hooked it up to an LED here. And just real quick, for those that haven't done this before, the way I do this is I take the LED I'm going to run the fiber optic into, and I drill a small hole. I use that same 1/32 drill bit. Drill a small hole into the tip of the LED. Not too far, because if you go too far, you'll damage the diode and it won't light anymore, so it's no good. But I'll drill that in. I'll put a little bit of hot glue on the tip of the LED. Don't put it directly on the fiber optic because it'll just melt that fiber optic. I put it on the tip of the LED, give it a couple seconds to cool off, just enough to where I can push that fiber optic into that small hole on the tip of the LED and not have it melt. And then I'll let it set up. And once it's set up, I can wire it in, which is what I've done here. You can kind of see that here where that fiber optic's coming in and it's running to this LED. Now I'll black all this out later because I want to be able to turn this officer's lounge on and off by itself. And I want my, well, that light does terrible when it reflects. And I want to be able to control my spotlights separately as well. I want to be able to put them on a separate switch. So I've got it wired up that way. And let me flip this over. And let's plug this in. And let me turn this light off. And there you go. You can see. Now this isn't too brightly lit on camera. It's a little bit brighter in person than it is on camera. It's just not picking up low light very well, which I've said before. But you can see how this spotlight is now. It's hitting right at that first line where my the first set of Aztec starts around the saucer here. So, and that's good because the registry, I believe, sits right here, or starts right here, and then the main part of the registry is right here. So that's going to light that up good. And that registry in the back here is going to get a decent amount of light on as well. Now, it may look like the officer's lounge is lighting that, but if I cover up this spotlight, you can see just how little light comes out from that officer's lounge. But with the spotlight, it's definitely a lot brighter. So that's going to light that up nice. Should look really good. And the other thing I've been working on, let me turn my light back on. The other thing I've been working on is the impulse crystal lighting. I've just got my impulse crystal taped in place right now. I'm not going to glue it in place until I paint the impulse deck and all that, and then I can put the crystal in after that. It just makes it a lot easier to paint, not have to worry about masking off or getting paint on that clear part. But what I did was in CAD, I did this little dish. And I'm going to put this and what's the word I'm trying to think of? I'm going to put this and just the Lightbox. Lightbox, that's what I'm trying to think of. This Lightbox for the Impulse Crystal and the one for the Impulse engines. I'll put a link for those down below. You can download them for free. The only thing I ask, if you're going to download free stuff, and you haven't subscribed already, please hit that subscribe button. Give me a subscription. And that helps me out. But those will be for free down below, so you can download those if you want to use them. I'll talk about an alternative if you don't have a 3D printer here in a minute. But so I've done this, and I put a hole in the bottom of it that fits the 3mm perfectly. And you can see I put a little foil tape in there to help with the reflectivity. And you do have to bend the wires on this LED at 90 degrees in order for it to fit. For it not to interfere with the lower part of the saucer when you install it. So I've got those bent in place. And let me see if I can just tape this in place real quick. Or maybe I can just get something to hold it there. We'll just put this lid under here to hold it in place temporarily. So I've got that. And then we'll just put a battery to this. And we'll see how it lights up. And by the way, just to mention previous video, I was talking about it's not really clear which one of the legs or the posts on these bicolor LEDs, which one's the amber and which one's the blue. Your shorter leg is going to be the blue. The shorter of the two positives is going to be the blue. Your longer one is the amber. So let's hook this up. Well, if I do my polarities right. So we got that. Let me turn this light off. And there we go. That's how it's going to light up. I might have to put a little bit of sheet styrene in there to tone it down a little bit. It's pretty bright. It's a little brighter than what I want it to be. So I might put a thin piece of sheet styrene between the crystal and the LED. That way it tones it down just a little bit. It's a little overly bright for my liking. But we got that. And let's try our amber. If I can do this in the low light. There we go. And there's the amber color. So that's going to light up real nice. I've got that set up. So now what I can do is I can paint, work on, I don't know why I'm taking my mic off, work on painting my impulse deck and get that done. And then I can mask this off and start working on the Aztecs for the outside here. But before I do that, I want to, let me unplug this now before I short something out again. Before I do that, I want to finish up getting all this internal lighting done, which means I've got to work on the nav lights. I need a red and a green nav light put in. I've already got the white up front here, so I got to get those put in. I've got to get the four I've got to get the four thrusters lit up. I'm just drawing a blank on names today. But I've got to get those four thrusters lit up with yellow SMDs. And then I can do the, I'll use the Cobb LED strips. I've got them right here. These are cool white. Now, some people have a different opinion of what should be used, whether it's a bright white, a cool white, or a warm white. On the movie ships, the TOS, I tended to use the warm white. On these, I tend to use a cool white. So I'm going to use the cool white Cobb LEDs. I'll cut them up and put a strip close to each window and get that wired in, and then that'll pretty much be it. That's all it's got to be done for this. I've got to do the same on the bottom part of the saucer as far as the thrusters and the nav lights all have to be installed on the lower part of the saucer as well, so I'll have to get that done. But let me start working on getting some of this stuff installed, and we'll come back and we'll talk about it and take a look at it. Alright, so let me talk a couple things about the way I do my lighting. So first of all, real quick, let me just mention, if you don't have a 3D printer and you can't do the light boxes that I'm providing, you can block off the impulse a couple different ways. You can use styrene. You can find something that fits over it and block it. Same thing with the impulse crystal, but I found this is off of, I'm just dropping stuff today. This is off of a water jug from Walmart. It's a Great Value water jug. I don't know if they're all like this, but this cap here fits perfectly in this depression. It's a perfect fit for it. So if you don't have a 3D printer and you're looking for a way to block off that crystal so that you don't get any light bleed to it or from it, it's a good option for it. It's a simple option. You just drill you a small, big enough hole to fit a 3mm LED in there, glue this in place, light block it, and you're good to go. So just wanted to mention that real quick. I had this sitting over here meant to talk about it when I was talking about the 3D print part, but it's just another option you can use. I think I actually did something like that on my first one, 350. Obviously I didn't have 3D printers back then, and I just put a cap like that over it and drilled a big enough hole to fit a 3mm bulb in it, and that's how I did it. So it's another option. It works very well, and it's cheap. So outside of that, and if you've watched my other build videos, you know this already, but I got this ribbon cable, this rainbow colored ribbon cable, and I like using it because I can color code my wires. And what I do is I take a list of the colors, and I've got 10 different colors to choose from. And what I'll do is I'll just work up a list. If it's something like this, now the O-berth wasn't that complicated, but because this is going to be a complicated wire setup, I actually did a diagram of a coloring code for this. Excuse me. So, I mean, some things are kind of, the red is always going to be positive, black's always going to be negative. That red's always going to be a 12 volt positive though, so keep that in mind on this build, unless you're doing a 9 volt. So that's a 12 volt positive. And then I just start kind of assigning colors. I try to make the color kind of match what the idea is. For example, the thrusters are typically yellow. So I did that as thrusters. Now I did impulse with the thrusters because I want my impulse engines to be able to turn on and off when the warp engines come online. And I figured the best way to do that, instead of running two different wires, the thrusters are pretty much going to be on when it's on impulse. So I'm just going to wire the thrusters and the impulse to come on together. It saves me a wire. The amber color is the orange for the dish and the crystal. The navs are going to be green and red, so I just chose the one color I had available, which was green for those. Blue is for the dish, the dish or crystal, the blue dish crystal. And then you've got, of course, you've got two different colors. You got the amber when it's in low power, the blue. So I've got two different wires for that. Obviously, they work that. Warp nacelles, although I'm doing them in blue for this, for the A, I'll do violet for the when I eventually do a refit. But for the A, they're going to be blue, but I just chose violet because it's the next available color that made sense. When I look at this, I know it's going to the warp nacelles. All my spotlights are going to be gray wire, and I've actually started doing that here. You can see gray wire that I've started running, and these are for the forward facing and the spotlight that I added over the officer's dining. So I've got those wired in. I've got a long enough wire to run down and come out the front of the dish. So when I go to wire all this together, and that's one thing to mention when you do the wiring for this, any wiring that you're going to have to run out of this down the neck, you want it to make sure that's, and this is probably overly long, but you want to make sure it's long enough to come out the front of the dish, because typically that's where it's easiest to wire all this stuff together once you get the neck and the saucer and the main engineering hull put together. Just run the wires out the front where the main deflector dish goes, and you can wire everything together there. So that's my plan. So I've got plenty of wire on here for it to go down through the neck and out the front of the dish. But I've got my spotlights there. My strobes are going to be white because your strobes are all clear or white. And then my negative, of course, like I said, is black. The only one the only oddball is the officer's dining, which seems like an odd thing to just have its own lighting. But like I said, in Star Trek 6, when it's at the end, when the Enterprise is floating away from us, you see that the officer's dining is off. And so I want to be able to do that, turn it off and on. It doesn't always have to be on, but so I've got a separate wire for that. The other thing to consider too is what your effects board is using for a control circuit. I know most of the Tenna controls, I don't know if they're all like this, but I know most of the Tenna controls boards I've use the negative or the ground side to control the effects. But on the Trek modeler, it's mostly positives. The only time where negative is used to control it is for your blue LED strip for your warp engines. Everything else is controlled by the positive wire. So what that means is I'm going to have multiple positive wires running everywhere. But to consolidate wires, all I need is one ground for all of those. So that's just something to consider. If you're using a board like I said, I think most of the Tenna, if not all the Tenna control boards, use the negative. In that case, you would run one positive wire to everything, and the negative would just control your effect. But in this case, this board uses positives. So in that case, I'm going to use negatives. But I may still have to run multiple negatives. I got to double check that, because these are. I may still have to run a separate negative for the because these are all positive 5 volts. So I don't think I want the negatives coming off of 9 volts or 12 volts wired in with the negatives for the 5 volts. So I'm probably still going to run a second wire for those. But in any case, it's still just one extra wire I've got to run. But we've got all those, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much how I go about planning this out. And now I can start working on wiring everything in, trying to clean up some of this mess on here. What I'll do is, once I get some of these wires done, now these thinner wires, I don't like to trim them back too much because they tend to break a lot when I'm working with them, and that's why once I get them down, I like to secure them in place. But what I'll do is I'll just put this tape over it, the reflective tape here, to kind of hold them in place so they're not flopping around all over. And also it kind of helps hide them, so when you got the lights on and you're looking through windows, although you won't be able to see through these windows too well, they're not 100% transparent. You won't see all the wires and stuff hanging around in here. It'll be covered over by something. So that's what I'm working on. The first thing I'm working on right now is doing the thrusters. And you can see, if I can get in camera, this one here that I'm working on. Get this mouse out the way. What I did was I took a piece of sheet styrene and just blocked this off, because remember, I want these thrusters to light separate from the inside main housing lighting, main saucer lighting. So I've got this blocked off, and I'll block it off on the sides too. But that way the light doesn't interfere. When I got these turned off, I don't have light leaking in and lighting these up still, because I've got the saucer lighting in. So I'm going to block this off. I've got this first one in. And let me put this saucer top on, and we can see how this is going to light up. Now, I will say that these LEDs, these are labeled as yellow, but they look more orangish to me, but that's okay. to work. I'm not too worried about them looking a little more orangish than yellow. Where's my battery? Let me turn this overhead light off, and we'll see how this lights up. I don't know if I can get the connection on there. Hold there. Hold there. It's kind of bright in here, but you can see that lighting up. And once I get this closed all the way, you won't see that black. That's just because there's a gap there still. But you can kind of see, without me going too much into focus, because I don't have a free hand now to focus it, you can see how that's going to light up. It's lighting on the bottom, on the top there. And if I can get it in camera, on the bottom you can see it there. So those are going to light up nice, and I think that'll work for that. So that's what I'm going to work on. I'm going to work on getting these thrusters set up. Once I get the thrusters down, I can come back and start working on the strobes and get those all set into place. So give me a little bit to do some work on this, and we'll come out and check out the progress. Alright, so I've got the thrusters wired in. You can see those here. There's one there, the other one's here, and then over here. Now obviously I've got some light bleed around the edge, and that's fine because I've got a light block from the outside anyway, because remember I've got those masks I'm going to use on the outside rim here, and then light block those. So this is all around the edge is fine. As long as I don't have it leaking light, the AB or the bridge BC deck where I've already done my detail, and the rest of this, that's what I wanted covered. This edge here is going to get light blocked with from the outside with some black paint anyway. So not to worry about that. You'll see how the windows around the BC deck are lit up. Let's take a look at a couple of these other lights too. I've got, let's see, what's this one? I have the officer's lounge lit separately. You can see that. Now I've got a little bit of a light leak coming from somewhere. I've been trying to light block it with tulip, but so far I haven't managed to get it all. I'm not sure where that light leak is coming from. It could be light bleeding over because this fiber optic, this fiber optic that I use for the spotlight, I didn't light block that completely either, so that might be carrying a little bit light over into there, but that's fine. It's dimly lit. It's almost like, you know, it's at a low light, and then when I want to turn it on, you can see it's obviously going to be quite a bit brighter when it's turned on. But you'll notice how it doesn't cast a whole lot of light over the back side there where that registry is going to be. The registry is going to be right in here. But I've got my spotlights wired up separate, and you'll see when that comes on, that lights this up a lot better where that registry is going to be. So that's going to work out real nice for that. The registry in the front, I believe the USS Enterprise is here or here, and then the main registry should be right in this area here. So that's going to hit that well. But everything else is lighting up real nice. See if I can do this without blinding everybody. But let it adjust. You can see how the rim windows, now they may look a little overly bright. That's because, again, I've got to light block all this yet, and that'll tone it down once once that all gets light blocked. But it was quite a bit brighter until I too far out of focus. And then I changed out. I was trying to use use up the rest of my high density cool white, and it just wasn't working out right for me. So I went to my Cobb LED strips, but these are a little bit brighter of a light, so I had to do a little extra work to kind of block this out. I've got a piece of sheet styrene in front of each set of windows. That way it kind of cuts the light down a little bit more. But you can see that officer's lounge up here. If I can get it up in there and get it in the focus. And you can see that's lighting up real nice now with that ambient lighting. So real happy with how that turned out. It looks great. And let's flip it around here and look at the officers or the rec deck. Oh, a little more slack in my wire here. And you can see how that's lighting up now. You can see that blue, the view screen that I painted blue to light up. There we go. And you can see, if I can get this to it, a little bit might be washed out. I have to go back the other way with the focus. Nope, that's about as focused as I can get it. So You can see some of that detail inside there, though. It looks really great as well. Real happy with that. Here's my impulse engines. You don't even see that hot spot in person, so I'm not too worried about it showing that one lower than the other. But that's worked out real nice. So far so good. I've got, let me turn this light on. Bring this focus down. I've got to wire in. The only thing I haven't done yet is the nav lights. I've got to get those wired in. And I'll show you how I do my wiring on this. Because it's basically chaos. and you got to bring some order to it. You know, it's a mess in here when you first put all the wiring in. But give me a minute. I'm gonna get this set up. I'm gonna get my nav lights actually installed, and I'll show you how I go about doing the wiring on that. That's gonna be a separate wire that I've got to run for that, and that's gonna be our green wire that I'm gonna run, as opposed to, you can see the yellow wire running around here. I've wired these in parallel rather than lighting them in what's the other term? Lighting them basically in sequence, whereas if you lose one light strip, you might lose the rest of them. So in other words, I did this in parallel. Everything's got its own connection to the power. There's a power wire for each thing, because the effects are running off of the positive. This yellow, like I had in my diagram, is for the thrusters, and I've also got the impulse engines wired into that. And then I've got a red, which is the 12 volt positive that powers all the internal lighting. And that's all I've got in here so far. I've got this one white wire running out for the strobe on top of the bridge, and then of course I've got the gray wire for my spotlights. So all that's wired in. I'm about to, and I had to make sure of this, that because it's been a while since I've done a setup like this, but I can wire, and thank you Mr. Hagen over there on the Star Trek Modelers Facebook page for letting me know. But Mr. Hagen Miller let me know that you can wire different voltages into the same common ground. So now that I've got that, I know I can go ahead and wire in that to the ground wire, which I've already got running around here, and I just got to run that green wire for the separate positive. So let me get set up for that, and we'll come back and I'll show you exactly how I go about doing that. Alright, so I've got all of my navs. You can see those flashing now. I've got all those wired up and installed, and they're working out great. You can also see I've got my strobe flashing there on top of the bridge, and again, you can see how well that floodlight is illuminating the front there, and then that little spotlight in the back is working out pretty well as well. I don't have the crystal in here yet, so that's why that looks a bit overly bright. And again, you can see my 4 thrusters are also wired and lit. So everything's looking good as far as the light test on. So let me hit this button and see if we can flip over to flip over to the blue. And there it goes. So that's working out great. I did have one other thing I wanted to show real quick though, and I don't know how well the camera's going to, let me turn this off, how well the camera's going to pick this up. Now the one thing I do need to do, the one thing I do need to get done before I seal this up, other than I got to work on the bottom section of the saucer still too, but I'm going to show you how to do the wiring on that. So give me a minute and we'll get to that. But one thing I have to finish on the top here is I've got to get the impulse deck done. At least I got to get at least the center part done, because I need to get that impulse crystal in place before I seal this up. So I want to get this painted, and then I've got a I don't know where I stuck it right now, but I've got a small round mask I made to put over this to protect it while I'm doing the painting. And but one thing I want to mention though is, and I don't know if I'm going to leave it like this, and I don't know how well this is picking up the color difference, but a lot of people just paint this whole thing the duck egg blue. But if you look at the studio model, actually this outer ring here around the the frame for the impulse crystal. This is actually light green, and I don't know if it was like this with the refit when they built the model, if this was all green, or if at some point this impulse crystal needed to be repaired and they went ahead and painted that blue, but for whatever reason never touched this up. Let me show you this picture. Pull this picture up for you real quick. And gotta wait for my monitor to come up, sorry. There we go. So you see in this picture that yeah, it's green, it's light green, and the framework around the impulse crystal is blue. So that's what I've done here. I don't know, I'm indecisive about it. I've got to make a decision on one way or the other, but that's the way it is on the studio model. So I may do it that way just to do it the way the studio model is, but I think it would probably look better if I just did this all in one color or the other. I don't know. I'm on the fence about it. I'll make a decision on here before I get this finalized. But I just want to talk about that and point that out. That and if you look at this in, I've got two different pictures here. So if you look at this in another picture, it almost looks like it's more of the, in that picture there, it looks more like it's the blue-gray. But it's not. I'm pretty sure it's just the way the colors are looking beside each other in the picture, and it's the lighting in that one for the most part, I believe. Because both of these pictures were taken at the auction, and so there was no change made to this between when these pictures were taken. But I think this was the light blue, because when I look at this on the model, this actually does, the light blue actually does look darker than, or the powder blue is what it's listed as on Gary's paint scheme. I got this, again, I got this from the Grissom build. But let me see if I can back this camera up, and maybe you can see if I can get the lighting right on this. So I'll move this back a little bit. And I don't know if it looks that way on camera. Again, I can't really get the lighting to, because this camera gets in the way down this low. But if you look at these two, and I don't know if it looks like on camera, this actually looks a little bit darker than this powder blue up here, but it's the same exact paint. It's from the same bottle I mixed up, and but it just looks darker here for some reason, probably because of the lighter green color. So I don't know, but just wanted to point that out just to make everybody aware, if you didn't know, that yeah, a lot of people paint that whole thing the powder blue, but on the studio model it's green on the outer, and then the frame itself is the powder blue. But do it any way you want. Like I said, I may go ahead and just paint this whole thing the powder blue. I don't know if I like the way that looks, but I'm probably going to not decide until I paint this white and see how that looks up against the actual white. But I've got to do some light blocking back here still, and then paint this white. And then my plan is, before I even seal this up, to go ahead and get the Aztecing done. There's some masks that go over this to do some iridescent paints on this. So I want to do that and actually get this done, and then mask this whole thing off to do the rest of it. So that's the way I want to go about doing that. But let me get some of this stuff out the way and get this lower section of the saucer flipped over, and I'll show you how to do the lighting, or how I do the lighting on that. Give me just a minute. Alright, so here's how I work out the wiring on the saucer section. So basically, I've already got my ground. If you can see, hopefully this foil tape's not going to cause too much problem. You can see my ground wires already run there, and I've got just a little bit left, a little bit of extra on there, so it'll run to the back here, so that way I can wire it into the ground wire on the lower, or the upper half of the saucer. I can just wire that together. And then, because we're doing the navs, I've got a piece of green wire, because that's the color I'm using for the navs. And like I said, the reason why I like using this colored wire is because if I always know what that wire is controlling when I work with it. When I showed you the top half, you see I've got 3 or 4 different wires running in there because I'm controlling different effects on the top. Now the bottom, you don't have as much to do. You've got the navs. There's no strobe on the bottom, and then I've got to run I'll use this negative as a common ground, I'll run this green for the navigational lights, and then I will run a red wire, because remember, that's my always on 12 volts. That one will power the lower sensor dome lights once I get that installed. Plus I've also got to put some strip lights in here to light these the lower windows, which you can see I've already where is my I'll show you real quick. I've got those acrylic window inserts put in there, and you can see those lighting up when I run the flashlight under there. So I've got the acrylic window inserts in there from Laserfire Creations. I've already put those in and sanded them flush, just like I did with the upper saucer, edge windows. So that's all ready to go. I also removed the, just like I did with the top, I removed the phaser banks on the bottom because those shouldn't be raised. And I'll add that detail back in a little bit later. But, so to do the wiring, basically all I do is I pick a side and just start off on the side. It really doesn't matter which side you start off on. But I'll pick a side and I will just start wiring this. And it's good to have a set of these the helping hands here to kind of help hold this when you're doing your soldering. So I've got that. Bring my solder over. And we'll heat this up. Oh, I got to turn my soldering iron up. I turned it all the way back down while I was waiting to record. But, so you got to have a soldering iron. And I recommend, like I said, I recommend getting a decent soldering iron. You can get some soldering iron stations for about 30 or 40 bucks off of Amazon that are real good. Those, the cheap little ones you get from like Lowe's or that, they don't work as well to me. I also use a glue gun to secure the wires once I get them in place. You're going to need some shrink tubing, which I've got a little piece of it here. I get a big box of it, which I've got sitting over to the side there. I can't really pull it over here right now because I got a bunch of stuff on top of it, but I get a big old box of it and just keep it handy. But that's the kind of stuff you're going to want to do this wiring properly, because you want to make sure that you can cover up these connections. All right. Once you get these soldered in, I like to cut off the excess piece of the resistor there. And once I've got that in place, I'll cut off a piece of my shrink tubing. And I can just slide this wiring through the shrink tubing, bring the shrink tubing all the way down. And you want to make sure you've got a long enough piece of shrink tubing to cover that entire piece. Especially if you're doing like this, if you're doing the tape like this, your foil tape, you want to make sure that you cover that completely, because you do not want that to touch the foil tape. And then what I'll do is I'll usually lay these around and glue them in place. And then once that glue sets up, I'll move on to the next one and just work my way around like that. And that's how I do it. I know a lot of people do it the same way. Some people may do it differently. Other than that, I mean, it's a pretty simple thing once you get the hang of the soldering's the hardest thing I had to get the hang of. It took me a while to get the hang of doing soldering real good. And other than that, let's see, let's move on. Let's do one more. I don't want to sit here and bore you to death watching me solder. So, but once you get that, I got to get that glue to kind of hold this in place though. Once you get that glue to kind of hold in place. Now, a lot of times I'll just use my zip kicker and the CA glue to secure these, because it's quicker. But the problem I've been finding is that CA glue does not like to hold to this foil tape. A lot of times it'll just pull right off. So I've been having to use my glue gun to hold these wires in place instead of doing it that way. And it takes a little bit longer to do. But so once that wire is in place, I can take this wire and separate it just like that. and that just gives me just a little bit of bare wire. I can take this and wrap that bare wire around the resistor, and sometimes I can get this to sit up enough to where I don't have to use my helping hands. Got to get that wire hot enough though to grab onto it. There it goes. All right, and we'll cut that extra piece of resistor off there. And yeah, it's not gonna be worth cutting that piece because it's gonna make too short a piece to use anywhere, so we'll just leave this on there. It's gonna be a little long, but that's all right. Bring this down and make sure it covers all the bare wire there. All right, got that in place. And now we'll come back with the hot glue gun. And that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, that's how I do my wiring. I'll just work my way around. I've got one more nav light to hook up, and then that's pretty much it. And then what I'll do, like I said, I'll put a light strip in here for these lower windows and get those lit up. And I will just run that wire from that. I'll run a red wire around here for my 12 volt. And I'll wire that in the same way. My light strip's in the same way. And then when I get to the back here, I'll have these wires. This one and this one will run out the back. This is where the impulse engine will be back here. These will run out the back. And once I'm ready to seal the saucer up, I will wire these in to the upper saucer part where I've already got these hooked in. I've got a long piece of black, long enough to run down out the front of the deflector dish there. I'll just wire this into that, and then that way I've just got the two wires running out, so I don't have multiple of the same wire running down through the neck. But we'll look at that more when I get to that point. But that's pretty much how I do my wiring on this. For each wire color, for each different effect, I'll go around and do the same thing. And it looks complicated when you get done, but it really isn't that bad if you do it that way and just do one at a time and go through it. So I'm gonna finish this up, and we'll come back and talk about what we're going to do next. All right, so the wiring is finished on the lower part of the saucer. You can see I've got it here, and I've just got it wiring in to the back side. You can see the white tape. I've just got it temporarily hooked up. I don't want to solder it in yet, but you can see where I've got the three leads. I've got the red wire, the black wire, and the green wire coming off the lower part of the saucer, hooking into everything on here. And let me just lay this down. Now I will say that I did test this, and I came back in and put 100 ohm resistors on all the light strips, including the ones on the bottom that I added, because it was just overly bright to me and I want to tone it down a little bit. So I put a 100 ohm resistor, just added it in line to each one. So each one's got its own 100 ohm resistor, kind of bringing down the brightness on it, because I just thought it was a little bit too bright. So let me get this kind of sit in place. And I've got a couple bare wires here, so I need to make sure that none of these touch anything. All right, so we got those out of the way. Just get this saucer kind of in place. I kind of ground down the pins a little bit just so it make it a little bit easier to hook these all up. Let's turn this on, and you can see it's not overly bright. It's toned down a bit just with that 100 ohm resistor on each one. So I'm a lot happier with the way this is. Now, you get a little bit of ghosting around these. I'm going to have to mask these. Excuse me. These windows are going to get masked, and then I'm going to come over the outside of this with some black, because you get a little bit, even though it's light blocked on the inside, you do get a little bit of light seepage around the windows, just where it's carrying into the plastic some. So what I'll do is I'll come in. I've got Gary's masks include window masks for this, so I'm going to put those masks on. I'll come over this with some flat black and light block it, and then that'll take care of that little bit of ghosting. I don't even know if you can. I think you can see a little bit of it on camera, where it's not a nice, crisp, bright window. So that's what I'm going to do about that. You can see the Those navigational lights are working. Right there, we've got the green, red, white. So those are all lit up. And let's take a look at... Now I do have to come put some tulip on this because otherwise it's going to... you want to put a little tulip on the back of these because otherwise you can see it's going to probably cause a little bit of pulsing inside the forward observation room. And you can see that forward observation there. Man, that turned out nice. I like the way that's lighting up. And these are going to look good after I get them light blocked properly. And let's see if I can spin this around. Yeah, I don't have enough slack to do it, but there's the rec deck. There's my impulse engines. And here's the top side again. So the next thing I got to work on, now that I've got that, is I've got to work on the lower sensor dome. Let me turn this light back on and get that worked out. So that's what I'm going to work on. I think I'm going to wrap this up. I think I'm running about 35-40 minutes now on this episode. So I think I'm going to wrap that up. So we pretty much got all the internal lighting done on this. The only thing left to do before I can seal this up is to do this lower sensor dome, which I've got the two parts. And I remember I said I was going to use the kit part on this because this this printed part just doesn't. It's really flat and some of the proportions are off. Plus, I know Gary's masks are measured to fit the kit part, so I want to make sure that toss that piece in the trash. I don't need it. I want to make sure that I'm using the part that the kit mask that the masks are going to fit on. So that's going to be this part, and I don't think this looks bad as far as the kit part. Now I know Ian had done some a little bit of work, just a little bit of putty work to the edges of these, just to make them a little more rounded. But I'm not going to worry about. I'm not going to go crazy into doing that. I just want to go ahead and get this set up. I've got some clear parts. I've got to work on light blocking and seeing if I can get this to kind of do a little bit of lighting on the underside of the saucer if I position a SMD in there properly. So I'll take a look at that. But we'll look at that next episode. I think this is pretty much a good stopping point. We got all the lighting on the saucer ready to go. So again, as always, I want to thank everybody for watching these videos. Welcome and thank you to all the new subscribers. I just continuously get new subscribers, and I appreciate that. I'm glad to see that because you know, it lets me know that people are getting these videos and they're watching them, and hopefully people are getting something out of them. And thank you to everybody that has been giving me feedback and let me know, hey, I watch your videos. Appreciate that bit of information. It's good to know what information is being used and what is being most useful to everybody. But as always, big shout out to my sponsors, Gus over at G-Cows, Cass over at Lake Monster Details, and Gary over at Mask Design. I am using a little bit of everything, or a little bit of something from all of them on this build. Gus has been hard at work on helping me out with these sensor bands. I said I was going to try the idea that Boyd over Trekworks had mentioned, which is basically to use some paint to kind of put those sensor band depressions back in place, and then just using decals to replace those sensor bands. But Gus is working on that. He's working on some other stuff as well. May put it on his website if there's some interest in it, so please let him know if you are interested in something like that. And Cass, of course, I've used his impulse deck, and I still am working on his shuttle bay. Oh, by the way, I also did a little more work to the dish here. I've got that front part painted with the light blue, or the powder blue as it's called, and that silver around the rim. So that looks good. Happy with that. I'm looking to start doing get this dish primed. We'll do that next episode, get that dish primed, and maybe do the lighting on that as well. But again, thank you everybody for watching. Until next time, keep modeling.